Good morning. Thank you, Amber. Good morning. We're getting better. I thought after last night we would have this down by now. Good morning. Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. Good morning and welcome to the 2021 annual meeting of the College of Arts and Sciences. My name is Jonathan Millen and I'm happy to be presiding over this year's meeting. Founded in 1966, CCAS represents over 800 deans and over 1,200 assistant and associate deans, fostering excellence in colleges and universities of arts and sciences. Members include nearly 500 institutions in the United States and around the world. As this year's program will demonstrate, we aspire to provide professional development program to our members and to sustain the arts and sciences as a leading influence in higher education. More broadly, CCAS serves as a forum for the exchange of ideas and information, representing the liberal arts and sciences in the national and now global policy-making level. CCAS further seeks to support programs, activities, and resources to improve the intellectual stature and public understanding of the disciplines of the arts and sciences. Now, if I could please ask you to all rise and give yourselves a round of applause for being here. And remain standing. Now, for those, please remain standing. Thank you. Now, for those of you who are joining us for the first time this year, you may please take a seat, and we'd like to welcome you to the organization. If this is your second meeting, we also will invite you to take a seat, and welcome back. And if this is your third meeting, you also may take a seat. The rest of you have to start counting now, back in your head, right? Okay, 4. Yes, we can keep clapping along the way, absolutely. And 5. I think if I was better prepared, I would have now been naming the cities so people could remember where they were. Where's Luis? That next time. I think we're up to 6. Is this your 6th meeting? And 7. Feels like a wedding, you know. How long have you been married? 8 years. 8 meetings. Do we have 9? I know you're very competitive. 10. Do we have 10 years? 11? 12? Here we go. Well, in all sincerity, thank you so much. Welcome and welcome back, and thank you for keep coming back. Arts and Sciences colleges represent more than half of the undergraduate instruction offered at our member institutions, and many member colleges are responsible for a wide spectrum of master's and doctoral degree programs. CCAS members therefore represent the largest component of American higher education in publicly and privately supported colleges and universities. Indeed, indeed. The CCAS Governing Board of Directors, which consists of officers and 12 directors who serve staggered 3-year terms, officers and term representatives will be elected at our annual board meeting. That's this Friday. I think that's tomorrow at lunch. I also need to acknowledge that with Veterans Day, we'd like to thank and acknowledge all of those who have served. I would like to acknowledge the board members who are sitting mostly in the front. If you all could stand for recognition as well. And Luis, it gives me great pleasure at this time to bring up Luis Falcone, one of the members of the board of directors, this year's program planner, and your president-elect. I didn't get that.
See, giving the guy in the back $20 does make a difference. Good morning, and buenos dias to those with the Spanish persuasion. We are absolutely delighted to be here. As chair of the program committee, we went through many agonizing days and meetings about what is going to happen come November. In fact, up until a couple of months ago, we were not certain if we were going to be here. But here we are, and we're really excited to see you in person rather than through Zoom. And let me tell you that this meeting so far has surpassed our expectations. We have over 330 people registered for the meeting, 75 presenters. We have members from 41 different states and from Canada. And the program includes about 30 breakout sessions, 2 receptions, because we always try to feed you well here at CCAS. And we have plenary addresses, lunches, and a terrific closing event on Saturday, which will include a musical performance. Please do not miss it. It's going to be really great. I have to tell you that this work does not just happen. I think that there's of course, members from the board involved in the planning of the meeting, and members from the local academic institutions. So the members of the planning committee that are here today, please stand up to be recognized. Of course, we're still in a pandemic, and there have been some changes to the program. A couple of the presenters for plenary sessions will be with us, but presenting remotely. Also, a session on Friday, Do You Want to Be a Provost? Is also the presenter will be joining us remotely, but be assured that we have made every effort to ensure that the distance doesn't diminish the value that you will receive from the session. I also want to say that CCAS went paperless in 2016, so the Whova app is the tool that we use for this event. So everything that you need to know about the conference is in the Whova app. In particular, I want to call your attention to the logistics section, which is in the home page of the app. The title is quite not right, doesn't really capture what's behind it, but all the documents, all the material for the case study sessions are in there. The ballot for the election is also there. Please remember, only 1 vote per institution, so if there's more than 1 person from your university, figure out who is going to cast a vote on behalf of your institution. So please use the Whova app to its capacity. Use it to communicate, to meet with others, arrange get-togethers, for dinner and things of that sort. Finally, I want to say that make sure that you follow COVID regulations, particularly within the hotel, the confines of the hotel, where masks are at this point still required. For those of you who are presenting as part of a panel, you can remove your mask during the presentation, but please be sure that others that are close to you are comfortable with that decision. And finally, I also want to call your attention. Over the last couple of in-person meetings, we have had the Thursday night reception off-site, and it has been a great success. Tonight is the off-site reception. It's going to be at the Portland Museum of Art. It's about 3 blocks away, so you can walk or you can take an Uber if the rain has already started. It's going to be a really nice event. We will have heavy appetizers and drinks, and the museum will be fully open for you to be able to enjoy it. Finally, the theme for this conference is reconnect, reimagine, and recalibrate. And I hope that you're all able to do that during this gathering, and I wish you, a great conference. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Luis. And just as a plug to our final program on Saturday morning, some of the music that you've been hearing this morning has actually been recorded and performed by our guest event. So please make sure you join us for that final session. Each year at our annual meeting, the CCAS Board of Directors honors an individual or organization with the Arts and Sciences Advocacy Award in recognition of their exemplary advocacy for the arts and sciences, flowing from a deep commitment to the intrinsic worth of a liberal arts education. Keeping with a format introduced in recent years, the winner of the award is invited to a conversation hosted by one of our board members. Before presenting this year's award, it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the stage Charlene Gilbert to facilitate today's discussion. Charlene is Dean of the College of Arts and Letters and a professor of film at the University of Toledo. She also chairs the CCAS Cultural Diversity Committee. Thank you, Charlene, for agreeing to host this conversation for our opening plenary. And now I would like to introduce our plenary speaker and the recipient of the CCAS 2021 Arts and Sciences Advocacy Award, Cathy M. Davidson. Cathy joins us today live via video. Hi, Cathy.
Hello, I'm so sad I can't be there today.
Well, we appreciate you making the effort and very much look forward to your remarks. By way of introduction, Cathy is Distinguished Professor of English and the MA in Digital Humanities and MS in Data Analysis and Visualization at the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. She is the founding director of the Futures Initiative, a program dedicated to advancing equity and innovation in higher education. She also is the R.F. Devarney Professor Emerita of Interdisciplinary Studies at Duke University, where she served as Duke's and the nation's first Vice Provost for Interdisciplinary Studies. She has published some 20 books, including Revolution of the Word, The Rise of the Novel in America, and The Rise of the Novel in America in Closing, The Life and Death of an American Factory. Her most recent book, The New Education, How to Revolutionize Higher Education to Prepare Students for a World in Flux, was the recipient of the 2019 Frederick W. Ness Award Annual Book Prize, awarded by the Association of American Colleges and Universities. In 2002, she co-founded and still directs Haystack, Humanities, Arts, Science, and Technology Alliance and Collaboratory, the world's first and oldest academic social network. The Haystack community hosts nearly 18,000 members. She served on the board of directors of Mozilla and of the National Council of the Humanities as an appointee of President Obama. She co-directed the Digital Media and Learning Competition sponsored by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation from 2006 to 2017, and she is co-recipient of the 2012 Educator of the Year Award from the World Technology Network and the 2016 recipient of the Ernest J. Boyer Award for significant contributions to higher education. She also is the recipient, obviously, of this year's College of Arts and Sciences Annual Advocacy Award. She travels extensively in the U.S. and abroad, lecturing and consulting on higher education transformation with students, faculty, chairs, deans, boards of trustees, and ministers of education on the effective ways to make education more equitable and relevant for today's students. She is committed to higher education reform in support of a more just society. And in 2019, she served as keynote speaker and panelist at the Nobel Prize Committee's Forum on the Future of Learning. Holy cow. For her outstanding and ongoing record of demonstrated service, please join me in congratulating Cathy Davidson on being named this year's winner of the Arts and Sciences Advocacy Award.
So deeply moved. I remember where I was driving when I heard about the award, and I really couldn't believe it. I have such respect for all of you deans who have an incredibly challenging, important job, one of the most difficult at our universities. And that you've honored me with this award it just fills me with humility and gratitude. If I could have been there today, I certainly would have been, and I would have loved to have met you all in person. I'm not quite sure what the method is now. If I should move straight into my talk, or if somebody else is going to come on. I'm going to be talking for about 15 minutes, and then I have the great pleasure of having a conversation with Charlene Gilbert in the second part of this. I'm not sure if you'd prefer me to just go straight on, or if there's a hiatus. Yes.
Okay, so Charlene Gilbert here. So I think what we should do is you should do your presentation. I'm going to sit in the audience so I can watch it, and then when you're done, I'm going to come up and we'll have a little bit of a conversation, and then we're going to open up for questions from the audience, and there are 2 mics already set up.
Thank you so much, Charlene.
So the floor is yours.
Thank you. I want to thank so many people, including Jeff Schneider, who is working the technology for this event and who very kindly is going to forward my slides today. Thanks so much, Jeff. Before I begin, I just want to acknowledge and honor the Indigenous communities, past, present, and future, and I'm grateful for their ongoing and vibrant presence. I also want to acknowledge the legacy and policies of genocide and relocation that so deeply affected those communities. And I want to end with something productive, which is to recommend to all of you in the audience today 2 wonderful books informed by Indigenous principles, and that certainly informed my thinking in the new education and my thinking today. One of them is a book called Red Pedagogy by Sandy Grand, and the other is Pollution as Colonialism by Métis scholar Max Lebroiren in Canada. The legacy is not just past, but present. And I hope that those two books have enriched me, and I hope they will you as well. First slide, please. Next slide, please. This presentation is dedicated to our students. Thank you for inspiring us to reconnect, reimagine, and recalibrate the future. And I hope those sirens in the background aren't too distracting today. The New York is sound. I live right near a hospital. And next slide, please. As an epigraph, I want to quote from Arundhati Roy's marvelous essay, The Pandemic is a Portal, where she says, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudices and hatred, our avarice and our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly with light luggage and ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. And one thing I like so much about this year's CCAS theme is how much it makes that choice and says, definitely, we're going to make the choice to walk through that world lightly without luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. Next slide, please. To frame our conversation today, my conversation with Charlene today, I'm going to just talk about 4 structural considerations for the success of students and faculty. And I really believe you can't have one without the other. Student success has to be faculty success and vice versa, or we're missing something very deep and important in higher education. Next slide, please. The first structural consideration is the material condition of students' lives. Next slide, please. Students today, and I know you know these demographics, there's slight variations depending on the year and so forth, but roughly 40% of our students work 30 hours a week. Higher education in 1890, when it was reformed in 1890, was not remotely conceived for students who are working at paying jobs 30 hours a week. 25% of our students work full-time and go to school full-time. 24% are from low-income families. 25% face food and housing insecurity. 58% of our students are female. 45% students of color. 25% over 25 years old. None of those factors were factors in 1890 when Charles Eliot, the 40-year president of Harvard, and his colleagues created the structures by which we still live in higher education today. Incidentally, 0.04% of our students attend the Ivies, 0.04%, but I swear 90% of what's written about college today, or ungrateful students or lazy students, or all of the things we read about with students are based on that 0.04%, not on the majority, vast majority of our 18 million students in college today. Next slide, please. The second structural consideration we have to look to is the so-called hidden curriculum, the cultural issues that are never spelled out, but that are implied in that system and structure of higher education that we've inherited for over 100 years. The term the hidden curriculum is a very old one. It goes back to 1968 and Philip Jackson's book, A Life in Classrooms. Next slide, please. And it refers to all of those things about college that are never stated, that are hidden and implicit, but that influence every aspect of our students' life and contribute mightily to the dropout rate of students who are not the 0.04%, who are the traditional students living on campus, not working any jobs, from middle-class families where they know about the conversation in higher education. I recommend a number of ways of addressing the hidden curriculum and making higher education more equitable. One is by looking at what happened when we stopped requiring SATs. We've seen across the universities many more applications from students from lower income families for the first time. One reason is we know that SAT scores correlate with income. If you've ever seen a map of school districts by wealth and a map of SATs, the maps are by highest ranking scores, the maps are almost identical. Similarly, if we're going to change and address the hidden curriculum, we have to think about advising and tutoring for any students that needs it. I know that several systems, the Arizona State system and the University of Georgia system, have gone to quite remarkable chatbots, AI-driven advisors that are available 24/7 and offer literally tens of thousands. I think it's 50,000 questions on the chatbot at Arizona State for students. And it turns out students are ashamed often to come and talk to their faculty or advisors about the deep problems they're confronting in education, often because they feel that if you talk to an advisor, it means that you're a failure. And they're in college because they're the students that didn't fail. So to go see an advisor often is a tacit admission of some kind of defeat. And they don't know that rich kids assume that advisors are there to help them. So AI-driven advising is one small way we can help students, actually a significant way we can help students. Changing our general ed courses so they're meaningful. Happy to talk about that in the conversation. It's so sad that we have one place where we show all the wonders of higher education, the interdisciplinary connections of higher education, and we typically do that in a kind of smorgasbord where students say, you know, one from column A, one from column B, what's available at 8 in the morning to meet my sociology credit this semester. It's a very cynical way and a real abdication of our role to have such a cynical form of general education. And finally, I think we should have one office that brings together the people bringing students into campus and the students responsible for placement. And that should be a continuous arc from the time we're admitting students in high school while they're in college till they're placed. And I think lifelong, especially as the number of students and the demography changes, so the numbers of students drop, lifelong education is more and more important. It needs to start with high school, really needs to be something we take seriously as a unified effort, caring about students' lives. Next slide, please. Pedagogy. We now have over 1,000 studies on the efficacy, efficiency, and equality of active engaged learning. And yet few of us were trained in active learning techniques, and most of us don't do it in our classrooms. Next slide, please. One of the most passionate advocates of active learning is the Nobel Prize winning physicist Carl Wyman, who's taught at Colorado, at University of British Columbia, now at Stanford. He's in both the physics department and the School of Education at Stanford, and is a huge advocate. He uses flipped classes, but he's an advocate for any method that has students reading outside the classroom and studying outside the classroom, and then using the precious time in class, whether it's 20 students or 400 students in a lecture, to really engage in how you learn to be an expert, how you take that material. The best students can be tutoring the other students. He has all kinds of methods that he advocates, and that all of us who are involved in active learning advocate for, making learning meaningful and giving us students a tool that helps them learn through the rest of their lives when there aren't midterms and finals that reduce everything they learn, their struggles as well as what comes easily to one letter grade. The publications of the National Academy of Sciences in 2014 did a meta study of 250 studies of comparative studies of how we learn, and quipped at the end that had this been a pharmaceutical study, traditional learning would be taken off the market. That's how marked a difference there is for every kind of student in every subject in every class size between active learning and traditional learning. Next slide, please. Finally, and deans, I know this is the most controversial one, we have to change our faculty reward and recognition system. Next slide, please. If we're going to ask faculty to think about students from high school for the rest of their lives, if we're going to ask faculty to be advisors and tutors to all of our students, not just the 0.04%, if we're going to ask teachers to learn how to teach effectively, even though most of us did not even think about teaching when we were in graduate school, if we're going to learn new methods, we can't keep making research being the only thing that really counts in our reward system. If we do that, we're basically penalizing our smartest people. If we're saying we want you to be involved in institutional change and change our general education courses, that's service. How well do we as a society teach service workers? How well do we in higher education reward service? We also know that's racially and gender discriminatory, because women and people of color, we've got lots of research on this, do the majority of service work at our institutions. Teaching, as long as we're not seriously and thoughtfully evaluating teaching and rewarding excellent teaching, why should somebody learn more effective teaching methods? If their only reward system comes from research, you're asking people to work against their own best interests in order to serve your institution, and even more to serve students today. Last slide, please. Next slide, please. My institution, Haystack, and my new institution, the Futures Initiative, has long had an adage that I believe in fully. We cannot change structural inequality with goodwill. We must design new structures with equality at the core. The 4 structures I've talked about today are ways of redesigning higher education to serve all of our students, to make the graduation and success of 100% of our students our goal. That is a goal that's very close to being the case at our most privileged institutions. It should be our goal at every institution. But to do that, we need to look at our own structures and change those. And think about how we can make changes with equality and excellence and efficiency at the core. Those are my slides. I really look forward to the conversation today. And again, I'm so sorry I can't be there in person. I know you're going to have wonderful conversations throughout this conference. And thank you all so deeply for giving me today the CCAS Advocacy Award for 2021. I'm very, very moved and grateful. And thank you all.
Thank you, Cathy. That was wonderful. This is the first time I've done this with a screen, so
Me too.
Yeah, okay. So I look forward to one day us being together again in person. But I think that your comments were right on target, and I think many of us in the room have been thinking about the similar issues. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit more, thinking about material conditions of our students. I think coming out of the pandemic, one of the things is that the material conditions of our students have once again shifted. I know in my own college, we unfortunately had a real setback in our first year retention and graduation rates. And when we did a data dive, it was really women of color that were the most hit, that were not coming back. And we speculate that, that in the pandemic, the people who were staying at home to take care of kids while someone had to go to work, who were taking care of the sick, that a lot of that work was gendered and it fell to women. And I think we saw what that looked like in terms of the impact it had on their ability to come back to school. I was wondering if you've had any thoughts or conversations about kind of how the pandemic has actually also contributed to a radical change in the material conditions of students.
Absolutely. I think the figure I've read is that the women in the workforce now is at the level of 1986 across the board. So what's happened as a society is absolutely reflected in the figures that you're seeing at the University of Toledo. It's one of the tragedies. I think I'm not going to get. I know I work with many young women who have children who thought they had egalitarian marriages, and in the pandemic learned out they hired healthcare workers. Childcare workers, or had childcare, paid childcare workers, and now are dealing with the incredible fallout, as so many of our students are, of what happens when, first of all, so many childcare workers are now working in the healthcare occupations because of the overflow of our hospital facilities across the country. And it makes complete sense to me. It follows the demographic pattern that women of color especially are finding this stress situation, either can no longer afford childcare, there's no childcare available, they have children at home, and they're not able to do it. They're just exhausted from almost 2 years now of having to be working from home, doing childcare from home. And for most of your students of color, women of color who have children, they may be working a paid job and doing childcare and going to school. So it's three things. That's two takes a superwoman. That it's three is unbelievable. We also know demographically across the country that even as many of the wealthiest institutions have actually made back the money they lost during the pandemic because of higher enrollments, the more students you have from the lowest income level, the more likely you are to have a decline in enrollment and retention. It's tragic. Community colleges especially are suffering very, very badly since they support our lowest economic students from our lowest economic background. So this is a national, absolute national tragedy and an emergency. We're going to lose a social mobility that will impact the next generation in really tragic ways.
Yeah. I think you mentioned the real work of higher education is happening at public universities and community colleges and state universities. You know, the very small percentage of students who are at the Ivy League schools. I know in that community of institutions, there's been a lot of conversation about going to a lottery system. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about a lottery system for the flagships at our public universities, because we often see that there's also a demographic breakdown in terms of who's going to the flagships. Would that be a way to address that, or is that a structural way to get it at the demographic population of our premier public universities?
Well, needless to say, it's extremely controversial to do this, and every place that has done this has had to be has an uphill public relations battle, because people who don't want to admit how unequal our systems are suddenly do admit it when it's their own children that are involved in a lottery, right? When the level playing field is fine until it's your own child, and then there's an uphill battle. On the other hand, the experiments that have resulted in the lottery system have shown that people profit. Everybody, including the best students, do. That there are real advantages to it. But I don't envy any deans out there who are advocating it, yourself included, because it always faces opposition, including from people most likely to profit by it. because most of us, I'm sure you've seen those statistics where almost 85% of Americans think we're middle class. So, so there's some version of that too, that people think if there's a lottery, their child is going to lose, even if in fact their child is from a demographic that is likely to prosper and do very well. Needless to say, a lottery system only works if there's also changes in the structures that evaluate advisors, teachers, what it requires institutionally to change to that system. You can't just have a lottery and let it go with that. You have to have a lottery that also is based on thoughtful other changes within the institution.
I think getting at the structures is so important because, you know, the situation, the problems that we're trying to address, they didn't just evolve overnight. And as a result, there are a lot of really entrenched ways in which it's supported and reproduces itself. So I really appreciate you encouraging all of us to think structurally about these problems and then to figure out how we address them. I think one structure that comes to mind is graduate training. So you were talking about the necessity and the effectiveness of active learning strategies. And I always say to my junior faculty, I recognize that our historians and biologists and chemists, the vast majority of them did not take a single class in pedagogy. So does that speak perhaps to a need to think about restructuring how we even do graduate education if we want to restructure the methods of assessment, evaluation for tenure track faculty when they get to the other side?
Absolutely. In the new education, I have a list of all the things that didn't exist before Charles Eliot and his colleagues reinvented the research university. And you don't have to define a single one. You know, it's everything from grades to credit hours, to graduate school itself, to nursing, professional school, law school, to all of the professions. Basically, any profession you could think of began its professional association between around 1870 to 1915. I mean, that's when our universities invented. Charles Eliot, also at Harvard, creates the first school of education. Explicitly, he created it for K through 12 teachers and explicitly said that college professors should not be bothered learning how to teach. That the point of a college professor was to carry on the research of their professor. And you teach however your professor taught. But the main point was to replicate the work of your professor. So that too is structural. There's a study that's kind of a funny but also sad study that was conducted in England of 12,000 classrooms, where sociologists of education actually measured what percentage of time faculty talked in a classroom. 87% of the class time was taken up by a professor talking, even in so-called discussion classes. And discussion classes, it turns out, are some of the least equitable classes, because we know that if you have 30, there's sociologists of education study this too. If you have 30 students in a classroom, you tend to think your students talk if 3 students a class, they're not the same students, but 3 students a class contribute to the discussion. And we all know those 3 students who raise their hand, and those 3 students are most likely to mirror the demography of their professor. So if you're in computer science, that's likely to be the men are talking. If you're a white professor, you're likely to have twice as many students of color than faculty of color at your institution, but it's your white students that are most likely to raise their hand. They're getting constant reinforcement in the methods of the 1890s, which is you're supposed to replicate your professor. Same with income level. 50% of college professors have parents with PhDs. That's shocking, right? It's a minuscule percentage of the general population as PhDs. Right now, I'm not remembering what that number is, but it's under 10%. Certainly, it's under 5%. I don't know the exact number. I'm sure people in the audience know that number. But we're replicating ourselves. If we really believe in social mobility, we have to change those structures. Active learning is one. Inventory methods that are very low stakes, where everybody gives an answer to something. That's what clickers do. I use index cards. There are many different ways to do it, where everybody writes something on a card at the same time. And then you see everybody's answer, and every student in the class sees every answer. Everybody gets validated. Interestingly, I use the same methods with 5th and 6th graders when I was doing the MacArthur Digital Media and Learning Competitions in inner city Chicago, that I use with graduate students, that I use when I give management trainings to CEOs or very high level executives, because CEOs say that managers watch them like hawks because they're afraid to say something that's wrong, and you have an incredible groupthink. So these inventory methods where everybody speaks without knowing what anyone else is saying, and you get all of the ideas in the room, are very much valued in management worlds, where often you have the same replication of the most powerful person in the room.
No, thank you. I'm going to invite our audience to start to, if you have questions, if you could go to one of the mics, and we will open it up for audience questions. And I will, I have one more while I'm waiting for any brave volunteer to go to the microphone. So I think one area that I've been interested in lately is the concept of universal design. I think that we've seen some tremendous benefits from universal design in our lived environments. So I'm sure as many of you realize, that's when, you know, we all benefit from the doors that can open with sensors, right? We all benefit from the cutout on the curb for riding our bikes. So these things become just part of how, if you're going to build a building, you build a building that has wide doors and all of these strategies that were designed to help people with different abilities and then help all of us. And so rather than thinking about how to adapt buildings on the back end, we design buildings now on the front end designed with everyone in mind. And I thought, you know, I was at talking to a junior faculty of mine who's in the disability studies program and talked about universal design for curriculum and for syllabi. And I thought that is a really, really, I think, fascinating strategy that maybe if we were to begin to think about, if we design our syllabi for every student, that might just become then how a course is supposed to look, and so that it has options and opportunities for different kinds of learners and different kinds of needs. So I'm just wondering if in your community and your work, is there much conversation about universal design in terms of syllabi in classrooms?
Constant. That is such a smart and interesting point. One of our fellows in our program, Jessica Murray, as a graduate student, invited the head of the MTA, the metro system in New York, to come ride. She's a disability scholar and activist, to come ride the subway with her. And she said she was going to come with some friends. And she came with, he was expecting visibly disabled people. Jessica, there's a movie about her. I know I'm not saying anything personal. She has multiple sclerosis, and sometimes she looks healthy. Other times she's not able to function in a so-called healthy way. She came with a football player who had broken his leg. She came with a woman with a baby carriage. She came with another woman who was pregnant. She came with somebody who was a little bit older. And so the point was, any one of those people is us. And that's also the point with a syllabus. I love your point about the universal design of a syllabus. One exercise that anyone can do that I love to do with a syllabus is spend the first 15 minutes having students work in group deconstructing my syllabus and coming up with all the things I don't say that they have questions about. So they get rewarded for asking as many questions as possible. And what happens is kids with any level of, not kids, I hate that, students with any levels of ability are rewarded for asking questions that serve everybody, but especially serve the students who come with cognitive learning. I myself am dyslexic, so I'm very sympathetic to people with learning disabilities. It's something I'm attentive to, but also visual, hearing impairment. And I make my syllabus in a Google Doc that then as a class, after we've torn it apart, we then build it again. And we build it in modules and think about ways. I always have somebody in the class who's a genius graphic designer or graphic novelist who will annotate the syllable with images. And it's fantastic. I never get questions in the semester about what was on the syllabus because it's such a group effort. But yeah.
That's great.
Could not agree more. Could not agree more.
All right. Our first question.
Hi, I'm David Eichhorn from Wichita State University. I really enjoyed your talk. I was just thinking about the four structural changes that you discussed, and the one that should apparently be the easiest one being the faculty reward and recognition, because it doesn't really require us to change anything we're doing. Might ultimately be the hardest one, because it's faculty having to change how they view themselves. And I kind of look at that the same way as when medical schools were trying to reimagine residencies and internships. And, I had to do 36-hour shifts, so you're going to have to do that
Right,
too,
right,
because
right.
that's what we do.
Right.
So how do we address the view from faculty that we're kind of dumbing down, for want of a better term, the requirements for tenure and promotion and things like that, by putting more emphasis on the really important things like service and teaching?
Thank you. That's such a great question. You put your finger on it. Culture is often one of the biggest impediments to change. One of the things I keep saying is, in a pandemic, hidebound academics who the cliche was, we couldn't change, we hadn't changed since Socrates walked the floor of the academy in ancient Greece. In a week and a half, we put 18 million students online, right? We have the ability to change. We don't just have the will, we now have the experience of enormous change that we can always look at and go to inspire us to change. I'm going to tell a negative story first and then some positive ones. Negative, I'm going to be very careful to hide the university, but I was at a famous university that had gotten reports everywhere about changing its major in a way that was brilliant, and suddenly went from a major that was nobody was taking to being one of the most popular majors at the university. And when I went there to talk about this incredible change, all the faculty were doing that were talking to me were complaining that they didn't get recognition at their institution for this incredible change. And somebody else in their department who wouldn't come to a single curriculum committee was getting all the credit because he had just won an award on his book. Now, I understood that resentment, and I guarantee everybody in the room, every dean in the room is saying, oh, I've heard that story, and I've probably perpetuated it, right? So here was something that had demonstratively changed the success of a department, and the people who were responsible for the change felt the person who got the rewards was the person who hadn't been to a single meeting, because during that time, they had written a book that got an award, right? How much clearer can we be about our reward system, right? And now the flip. I work with a group of college presidents. It doesn't have a name. I will never say who they are. It's very informal. I'm just kind of a sounding board. It works and is effective because I'm nothing. I have no relationship to their institutions, not an alum of any of their institutions. I just give them feedback. And they give each other feedback in this very informal way. And a couple of them have come up with a system they call the 2 out of 3 system, which is almost like contract grading for faculty, where faculty can say, for the next 5 years, I want my reward system to be based on 2 out of the 3. For the next 5 years, I want it to be on research and teaching, because I've got to get this darn book done. It's driving me crazy. My family's not speaking to me anymore. I ruin every holiday and every weekend saying I have to write the book. I've got to get that done, but I'm just not going to do any service. They sign a contract, and if they get their book done, they get whatever it is, the promotion, they get the raise, they get the accolades, whatever, because they fulfilled their contract. When the 5 years are up, they better be on some major committee to make up for the 5 years they didn't. But it makes people aware, gives people control over their lives, is good for institutions, but it says sometimes you just can't do everything, right? The same for somebody who says, okay, I've heard Davidson talk about this active learning stuff so many times, or Carl Wyman so many times. I don't know how you take bell hooks and Paulo Freire or John Dewey and turn them into an actual classroom. I want to study this. I really want to make research on teaching and implementation on teaching something serious in my life. But if I'm going to do that, I'm not going to be working on that monograph. I published one last year. I'm not going to work on a monograph the next 5 years, and I don't want to be penalized for it. They fill out a contract in the same way. I think that's one of the most hopeful things I've seen, because it's structural. It doesn't seem like someone's getting away with murder. In fact, it says somebody is seriously dedicating the same amount of research, and we've got the labor studies. We academics work like crazy, right? I think I think our average academic is now 66 hours a week, which puts us up there with CEOs, right? That's a very heavy, there's almost no such thing in these sociologies of education as somebody who doesn't work some amount of hours on a weekend or after the so-called 9 to 5 hours, right? Look around the room. I'm sure I'm getting a lot of nods there. I hate not being there.
You are.
I'm sure because yep. You know,
Yeah.
my family knows on weekends I'm going to be doing work, and they know at night I'm going to be doing work, right? If we know that someone is not sloughing off, but is actually working those same 66 hours a week, but concentrating on things they need to do for a purpose, changing the curriculum, learning how to teach better, finishing that monograph. And then when the 5 years are up, they'll do other things. I think that's something worth thinking about. And that gets around that cultural issue that the dean from Wichita State just said of, you know, I did grand rounds in medical school. I did internships in medical school. Everyone else has to too. Because it comes up, again, it comes up with a structure, a recognizable reward structure, not somebody just getting away with murder or letting you do the work while they're off writing a book that's going to get an award. Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful talk, and congratulations on your award. My name is Kenchel Dorner, and I'm University of Alaska Fairbanks. I wondered, there's a lot of data out there that shows that men percentage is going down and has gone down in higher education, and retention and graduation rates are also lower for that particular demographic. That's exaggerated for males of color. I wanted just to get your thoughts on that. How did we get here? Remedies possibly, and at least in my thinking, there might be some pretty substantial societal implications for having such a disparity in the genders in general. Just your thoughts.
Many thoughts. I teach at CUNY, and we've had a Black Male Initiative for many years. So we've been tracking for a long time the declining number of Black men at our institution. The figure that got everybody's attention this year is it's no longer just students of color, men of color, but men across the board. I have a cynical take and then an optimistic take. Cynical take is we've had 10 or 15 years now of certain commentators, for some it's ideological and political, for others it's technologists saying college isn't worth it anymore. You don't need college, right? Despite the fact that we have so much hard research on college still being the number one engine of social mobility. But, you know, at some point people are going to start believing your propaganda. If you're saying college isn't worth it, maybe people are going to believe it. There's a parallel cultural factor, and especially men, because the things that supposedly you don't need college for are traditional male occupations. The four female occupations, still, nobody's ever said you don't need to have college to be some kind of higher education, to be a nurse, social worker, librarian, teacher. And those are still the four fields that women most go in, right? And they're the most underpaid fields too. We've got that demographic too. So that's a different and parallel social structure. But we don't have a rhetoric of you're going to make tons more money as a woman if you drop out of college, because the professions that are the professions, female professions, and the professions for social mobility, there's no way around certification and credentialing. You're going to be an entrepreneur. You're going to be a tech genius. You're going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. You're going to be the next Bill Gates, right? Bill Gates' kids are all in college. And he, by the way, it's so fallacious. I know the people who taught him when he was 9 years old and came to the University of Washington and said, with his dad, and said, I had the privilege to work at length with Melinda Gates when I was at Duke. She was one of our trustees, and I stewarded her, so I got to know the family. But his dad literally brought him to the computer science department of the University of Washington, said, anyone take care of my kid's board in school, and he seems really smart, anyone can take care of him. And my friend Ed Lazowska was the one who took little Billy under his wing and basically gave him a college education before he went to college. So to say he didn't go to college is so false. It's just totally false. But that rhetoric of you don't need to go to college is a rhetoric that's such a gendered male rhetoric. Are we surprised the boys are young boys are finally going to start to believe it and say, I don't need to go to college, right? You know, and so I think there's a social responsibility there too. There's also the factor that most high school teachers are female. And I think the more high school is about rules and outcomes and standardized tests and things that just kill curiosity and kill learning, the more you've got women in the position of being enforcers, and there's got to be gender implications for that too. So I actually think I'm part of the ungrading movement. I'm happy to talk about that. That's a little more complicated. It takes a little more time, but we didn't give, grades were also invented. Mount Holyoke, 1888, first college to reduce all of the discursive dialogue, written comments to a letter grade because they wanted to produce the modern woman. And Taylor, literally, the Taylor, Frederick Winslow Taylor said, oh, grades, that, you know, that's how we grade meat. Give grade, right? Incidentally, when I wrote my last book, not Now You See It, but the one before that on cognitive neuroscience, I interviewed people from the Mount Holyoke is the first institution to adapt grades. The American Meatpackers Association in 1888 is the second organization to adapt grades. When I interviewed people in 2010 from the American Meatpackers Association, they said, well, you know, every piece of meat has all the comments still on it. I said, what do you mean? They said, you can take any piece of meat and trace it back to the inspector and you find they're written out. He said, we take sirloin and chuck way too seriously to just reduce it to a letter grade. I was floored by that. But I think that system of outputs and standards that's enforced through teachers who are female also has an implication. And of course, when the society is saying, and guys, you can grow up to be a billionaire. You can be Elon Musk, and although he went to college, but sending things off to space and doing whatever. You don't need college to do that. It's gonna young men are gonna start listening. So we have a big PR structural issue. All of those combined together.
Yeah, thank you.
Great question. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Dugan. I'm the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of Pikeville in Eastern Kentucky. I wonder if you could speak to the demographic cliff that we're facing, and maybe this question is more for small, private, rural liberal arts colleges. I know, speaking for myself and my college, I feel great pressure to innovate, to be experiential, to kind of take the traditional disciplines and really create new structures that will be more attractive to students who are not in our traditional applicant pools in Eastern Kentucky. And at the same time, you know, there's so much fear and hesitation on the part of faculty whose whole lives are sort of poured into what they do in their disciplines and in their teaching methods. And then you add in the demographic cliff, and it feels like, you know, you read the Agile College and the college stress test and colleges that close, and you just feel like, you know, I wonder what you would say about how your observations about structural obstacles and resolutions to them fit into what's going to be happening over the next few years in terms of our demography on our campuses.
Thank you. It's such an important and serious issue. I have such, you know, we can't really go back to the 2008 financial crisis and said, but it's going to get better, so keep having kids, right? I mean, that's, you know, we really have a huge demographic cliff in this country. We're going to have another one after the pandemic. People thought, ooh, people are all home during the pandemic. We're going to have a baby boom. That was not the case.
Because we were exhausted from doing the laundry and watching the kids.
Exactly. I do think that the only way many colleges are going to survive is by changing their identity. I went to a small liberal arts college, Elmhurst College, that last year became Elmhurst University. Why? Because it's offering an array of professional master's degrees, certification degrees, all kinds of things to be able to survive. I think that is more and more the case. Faculty are freaked out because they were taught. Someone is going to hear this and laugh because I always make Dryden my whipping boy, but I'll do it again. You know, if you're a Dryden scholar and you live to teach the 17th century so you can teach Dryden, it's hard to suddenly be thinking about students who really don't find, you know, Dryden just doesn't make them sing, right? You know, so it's hard because you got into this profession because you went to you're a graduate student, which is based on the research university based in 1880, which is based on research, right? And suddenly you're being told, even though the reward system is different, even though your own education is different, even though the structures are still the same, you have to change. So I would turn back to you and say to your faculty in Eastern Kentucky, this is the reality. If we're going to survive, and it is a binary, it's we survive or we don't survive, we have to change. So what supports, what structural supports can we give you, even at this financially stressed time? What can we give you that will make this change exciting and like a midlife crisis fulfilled, like a whole new lease on life, and not something that's dreadful and that makes you feel incompetent? Because the thing that makes students drop out of college, besides material conditions, is not, we've seen the work on this. Georgia State University has done wonderful work on the why, that students, if once their their material conditions are met, the number one reason they drop out of college is they don't know why they're in college, right? I think there's something the same about faculty. They don't know why they're doing what they're doing, and they're having to do stuff they're inexpert to. It's so demoralizing. So you have to do things that make it a structural change that the whole university is engaged in, with rewards for faculty who learn how to do it and who can do peer mentoring for other faculty, together can learn new fields that do work for students today. I think lifelong education is huge, and learning to teach students who are coming back to college. Flexible degrees are important. During the pandemic, oh my goodness, we even gave up the Carnegie Credit Hour at many universities. Also invented, Charles Eliot hired an industrialist to come up with a system to match how you learned in college with the new Fordist model. And 1911 was when the report came out called Academic and Industrial Uses. And it invented the Carnegie Credit Hour to mesh with the assembly line. Well, we don't live in that world anymore, but we're stuck with the Carnegie Credit Hour. In nothing else but in higher education or in certification do we believe you need a certain number of hours to learn. We know some things take longer, some things don't take longer. Why do we have these static rules for learning? That again makes people say, why am I doing this? Couldn't I learn from a YouTube video? Right? All my students, even in classes I teach, will come in and say, I heard something much smarter than what you told us last class by watching a YouTube video. Right? I mean, there's so much information available. We should be able to use that for us, not against us, and use that to help our students navigate this incredible world, including the world of misinformation. There are a lot of crazy ideas out there. If we can teach our students how to evaluate those ideas, we've given them a tremendous tool for life, and I think we've given our society something tremendous too. I know to the dean at Eastern Kentucky, I'm asking for a lot, but I really don't think it works unless it's a collaborative, exciting group effort with real rewards and empathy for somebody who feels like, whoa, I just can't make all those changes, and supports in doing that. Team teaching in situations where there hasn't been team teaching before, which may require something else to change in the system for that to be affordable. But if you've got declining students, maybe that's actually not unaffordable anymore. Allow team teaching and have slightly bigger classes. maybe seniors and juniors in the same class together. I think redoing general education in an exciting way based on topics is both a challenge because it means people have to relearn, but it's also very, very exciting and a great way to teach teachers how to rethink what they do as teachers. I mean, I would love to see a general education course be the pandemic we live in now. And there is no field in general education that isn't relevant to that. And it would bring all the teachers together, all the instructors together, really thinking through what they have to contribute, what methods, what ideas they have to contribute in that situation. Student could get wonderful general education that would serve them the rest of their lives. A quick thing, one thing I do with my students is I have them go online and find out what higher order thinking skills are required for their first job when they graduate from college. And I have them make a list of those. And every time we do one in my classes, they put them on the resume. And they literally build a resume through the term. Hey, today we did collaboration. That was on your list. Go put it on your resume. Say the date, say what you did, put it on your resume. It's a real thing. You've mastered it. You nailed it. That goes on your resume. And then the last class, I say, you know, a good resume is 1 page long. Pull out your resumes. How long are there? And by then, students have 5-page long resumes. I say, whoa, we have to spend today taking things off your resume that you learned in college. That gets rid of the why very quickly. Right? That's a great exercise. It also means they have phenomenal resumes when they go out on the job market and they're looking for summer jobs or jobs after they graduate.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Kathleen Llewellyn, Associate Dean at St. Louis University. It seems to me that the changes we're aspiring to here, changing pedagogy, dealing with cultural issues, and changing faculty reward systems and so forth, I think that that can happen when there is clear public benefit to the university for those changes. And so 2 questions here. First is, how do we make that happen? How does the success of a different body of students translate into benefit for the university? And how do we let the world know about that? How do we let US News and World Report know that we're better because of it? How do we let potential applicants know and their parents and donors? Thank you.
Thank you. Another fantastic question. I used to have a provost who said, the old adage, healthy, wealthy, and wise seems obnoxious till you realize that demographically, if you're wise, if you have more education, you're likely to be healthier and you're likely to have a higher income. So, you know, we've got a cliche that never hurts to start with a cliche. Right? That, you know, so on the one side, higher education should be something embraced by everybody. You're from St. Louis University, and I actually don't know the demographics of St. Louis. How many of your students are from St. Louis University? How many are from St. Louis, and how many are national? There's clearly a different kind of public relations that you need if you're a commuter school like the one I teach at now, CUNY, or if you're a campus-based school, a residential school like the one I used to teach at Duke, and I taught at Michigan State, where most of our students live on campus. For universities that actually serve their communities, I don't think you can say enough what the relationship is to student success and community success, what partnerships there are between the community and your university. And those partnerships are invaluable for everybody. Again, the dropout question of why am I in school? If somebody has an internship, they understand why, right? I mean, an internship in a real job makes apparent the why, and it also does your community good. I think the more community events a school puts on and has participation in, they always do get local media attention, and they're great publicity for your university. For places where students are coming from all over the country or even all over the world to the university, you have a different PR issue, but it still sometimes is related to how people are contributing to society, whatever that is. That might be in China. You might have 10% of your students at St. Louis University, in fact, come from China. What are they learning in St. Louis and about St. Louis and about your university that they're bringing back to China that's going to make the world a slightly healthier, safer, smarter place? Some of it's rhetoric, but I actually don't believe it's rhetoric. I actually believe it's actual important connections. I'm passionate about the importance of what we do. I'm passionate about the importance of what we do. And I think that passion is something no university can be without. If we're going to succeed, we have to believe in what we do, and we have to make sure that we're constantly telling the world that what we do isn't, not what we do is important, but what our students do, what our faculty do, what we as an institution do is important for all of us as in society as a whole.
All right, I think that that may be a wonderful place to end. Thank you so much, Cathy. It's been wonderful doing this virtual talk Q&A with you. Everyone, please join me, and let's give Cathy a wonderful round of applause.